Katie, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm so excited to learn more about your story and just hear how you're going big in your life. So, with that, I'm going to ask you, how are you going big?
Hi, Krista. Thank you so much for having me. And how am I going big? Well, I guess the simplest way to say it is I am changing my definition of what going big means to me and owning that definition because in my life, I feel like fairly early on, I checked the boxes for what it meant to go big in the traditional sense. And it was the worst time of my life. It really was. It became the worst most horrible struggle of my life. And I have decided to rewrite that script, that story for myself, and now really go big in the way that means the most to me. And I'm so happy and fulfilled, and I feel like I've become the truest form of myself.
And there's so much bravery in that because that's something you have to choose. That's not something that happens by itself. It's not something somebody falls into. Like, you have to actively choose and decide that this is not the life that I want. This is not the life I was meant to live. But now what? Right? There's always that precipice, that question on the end of it that's like, okay, this isn't the life that I want, but what does that life look like? So with that being said, I would love to know what that journey looked like for you, from going from, okay, this is not the life that I want, and transitioning into, what did you do to change that?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last, probably I think it's been 8 years now since my last career change. So my whole life I've been about finding that purpose, finding, who I want to be in that period of my life. And so because of that, when I was in college, I changed college majors. And then I went out into the world and used my degree, and I was a environmental planner and used my science degree. And at the heart of me, I want to help people. I want to change the world. And so I keep finding various ways to try to do that. Um, and so after finding out that being an environmental planner wasn't for me, then I switched to human resources. And I've been doing that for the last 8 years and worked my way up to being an HR director, which, when you think about career direction and, what society tells you you should be like, you should climb that corporate ladder, right? You should aim for the director, aim for that C-suite position. Like that is the ultimate success. That's where the money is. That's where the people, like your title means something to people before you even walk in the door. And I did that all while starting a family. I started my executive leadership career right after giving birth to my first child, my daughter, and she's 4 now. And worked with that organization. Eventually, was promoted into the title of the job that I was already doing because from the time that I started with them, I was doing the director job. I was coaching and guiding our CEO and our executive leadership team. And, they just didn't start me out with the title. So finally, about a little over a year ago, I got that title and I was pregnant with my second child, with my son. And, there were a lot of things going on at that time. Being pregnant was one of them. I lost my mom to cancer uh, shortly after becoming pregnant. So there was a lot of grief and dealing with, the pregnancy hormones and trying to find that balance of, having these heavy, heavy feelings and this incredibly stressful, high-powered, very visible job, and knowing that how I was managing my emotions was affecting this little life that was growing inside of me. And so that very quickly led to a very obvious decision. So in California, when you're looking at maternity leave and pregnancy leave, the state is fantastic because they have pregnancy disability leave. And what's typical out here is about 4 weeks before your due date, most doctors will give you the option to start your pregnancy disability leave. And I knew right away that this time around I was going to do that. When I had my daughter, I I didn't know anything and I thought I would be bored. So I worked all the way up to my due date. And so reflecting on that and being in a much more visible position that had a much wider impact, I knew I needed to not be working those 4 weeks because I knew what my mental state was going to be. I knew that I wasn't going to be focused. I wasn't going to be able to critically think. And that really what was most important to me as a mom and balancing that career and being, the mom that I wanted to be, I needed to take that time to focus on myself and focus on, preparing myself to bring another life into the world. And so what that really led to a really interesting impact on my career and honestly quite sad because my entire time in this position at this company, I had worked very hard to set up their leave of absence communication process and really the culture around it. Because when I started with them, people were afraid to take maternity leaves. And it was kind of like this badge of honor that they were in the delivery room still sending emails, and I had spent 3 years changing that dialogue and making people aware of the amazing benefits that California provides so that when you take those leaves, you're not losing your pay, at least not all of it. They really do make it financially able to take that time off, care for your body, care for your child. And so I worked really hard to change that narrative. And then when it was my turn, suddenly I was getting this pushback. And this, it wasn't direct. Nobody was saying, "Oh, you can't take a leave of absence." But especially with my CEO, who I worked very closely with, the dynamic started shifting and the tone. And I just started picking up on these little like ticks anytime I talked about my maternity leave. Because of course people are like, "Oh, are you looking forward to your maternity leave? Like, we're so excited for you. You're having a baby." And, I would just notice that she'd get really quiet and her facial expression just wouldn't be super pleasant. And so, of course, being the HR director, I don't avoid conflict. Like something's uncomfortable, I have to address it. So in one of our meetings, was like, "Hey, so I've been picking up kind of this weird vibe. Like, are you okay with me going on maternity leave?" And I will never forget it. She literally, like, we were on a Zoom meeting. She ducks her head, looks down at her hands, kind of starts like fiddling with her phone and her fingers. She's like, "Well, I have to put my legal hat on." I'm like, "You have to put your legal hat on? Like, are you kidding me right now?" And she does, this song and dance, if you will, is like, "Well, I know you're doing what's within your rights, and it's absolutely, what you should do, and I don't want to discourage you, but I kind of feel like some of the executive team thinks that you're just going on vacation because you're going out 4 weeks before your due date." And I was just like, "Okay." One, no, this is a medical necessity that my doctor is recommending that I do. No, I'm not going to frame that for everybody when they are casually asking me, "Am I looking forward to going on leave and what are my plans?" Yes, I am planning on relaxing. I'm planning on doing yoga, on doing my meditation, like mentally and physically preparing myself for this baby. And so it was a horrible feeling after having spent so many years trying to change that narrative for this organization. And she ended that conversation with, because we were doing, as an executive team, we were doing some leadership training. We had a leadership consultant working with us, and there was a leadership meeting the day before my due date. And she's like, "Well, obviously, like, you're not required to come to the meeting, but if you'd like to come to the meeting, you're more than welcome." I was like, "No, thank you. I'm on leave." If any other employee even suggested that, I would tell them absolutely not, not only for their sake, but that puts the company at a lot of liability. Like, no, no. So yeah, so that's the tone I went into my maternity leave with. And as things happened, there were some complications with the birth. I had an emergency C-section, and it extended my medical leave of absence much longer than we had anticipated. And then California, again, is really fabulous that after you're done with the medical necessity part, they have an additional 8 weeks of baby bonding time that is protected leave, partially paid leave, that I was absolutely, gonna take advantage of, and I wasn't gonna shorten just because my medical leave was longer than I had anticipated. And there were still some weird conversations, dynamics, just a lot of things that were just leaving a really horrible taste in my mouth. But then I did, it came up to August, about mid-August, and I went back to work after my leave. And and then she didn't talk to me for almost 3 weeks. Like if there was an audience, she'd be like, "Oh, hi, Katie, you're back. I'm so excited." But like if there wasn't an audience, she didn't talk to me for 3 weeks. Didn't update me on all the HR happenings that had gone on while I was gone, things that I like, didn't touch base with me at all. And I was like, really? Like, are you kidding me right now? I am the HR director. And like, I think it's fair to say that I'm literally being somewhat discriminated against right now. Like, are you kidding me right now? Like this is what I fight against. And I protect employees against this. And so when she did finally talk to me and, again, addressing the elephant in the room, she was like, I didn't think you were going to come back. And I've never had an employee who didn't regularly check in while they were on leave. And I'm like, no, that's not what you're supposed to do when you're on leave. You're supposed to disconnect from work and concentrate on your health and your family. Like, are you kidding me right now? And about the same time as this was going on, there was an executive leader on the team who he'd been with the organization for like 25 years, getting ready for retirement. And unfortunately, he got diagnosed with cancer and was going through chemo treatment. And, he was talking to me and trying to work through a very difficult employee relations issue on his team. But he was telling me that he couldn't manage this person. He couldn't hold up his part of holding this person accountable because he was so tired and unfocused because of, very reasonably the cancer treatment. And so, of course, being the HR director is like, we've talked about this before, but maybe you should consider a leave of absence. Like it's protected, it's paid. Like you need to take care of yourself. And what I'm hearing is you can't do your job because of your health. This is the exact reason you take a leave. And he got so angry and fired up. And all of a sudden, and again, we're on Zoom because we do everything on Zoom. Suddenly he's pointing his finger at me and going, no, I'm a loyal employee. I'm needed here and I'm going to stay because that's what a loyal employee does. And just from the tone and the finger pointing, I'm like, oh my God, he's talking about me. This man is channeling his anger, his experience, talking about me. And it crushed me. It absolutely crushed me because I had spent years on this problem right here. And I had thought I had made a difference. And I know I made a difference for the frontline employees because we had a lot more employees taking their leave of absence, being comfortable doing that. But here at the top level, at the people, my peers, my boss, the people I work with, I hadn't made a dent. And it was crushing. And then shortly after that, I think I had been back to work for about a month. I started having symptoms of postpartum depression. And I sunk. I, you know, my, the core of who I am is this happy, bubbly, there's always a silver lining. When we hit challenges, we fall down, we get back up, always moving forward. And I found myself falling down and going down these really dark rabbit holes where I couldn't find the light and I couldn't pull myself back out. And so and I told my husband, I'm like, oh my God, like, this is not me. This is not who I want to be. And, we decided that I needed to go talk to my doctor. And fortunately, I had a really wonderful OBGYN who delivered both of my children, knew me really well. And so I was able to go in and talk to her. And even though I was feeling this incredible sense of shame and feeling lost and not knowing who I was anymore, I was able to go into her and she very kindly, without any judgment, talked to me and fully believed me when I said, hey, I'm having these symptoms. I think it's postpartum depression. And for her to say, okay, yeah, let's talk about some options. We can talk about medicine, we can talk about therapy, and really making a plan of action. And I had already reached out to my therapist because every time I get pregnant, I feel like I need to go to therapy. And again, just make sure you're mentally prepped for the heaviness and the awesomeness and responsibility of being a parent. So I had already reached out to my therapist to get, on her schedule and do that. But I was like, yeah, like I'm scary low. Like let's try some medicine. So it took a couple of tries and I didn't love being on the medicine, but it was, I needed it until I could get out of my job because really that was the next step was, okay, this depression, it's postpartum depression, but it's very much triggered by this job, by the stress of this job, by these conversations, by this environment that is incredibly toxic. And one way or another, I need to get out. And it was a really, really difficult time. I mean, it was also around the 1 year anniversary of losing my mom and just this horrible lost feeling I that I hadn't really experienced to that depth. But I knew the first thing was, okay, get help, get your mental get help for your mental state, get balanced again, and then make a new plan. And so that's why I feel like, I was an HR director, I had two kids, we had checked so many boxes in the like life goals. Like we have a house, we go on fun vacations, we have a boat, like we did all the things. And so for me, I just felt like it was life telling me to stop. And while I enjoy, there's so much about HR that I enjoy in the ability to help people. But I thought, okay, well, if I'm going to quit my job and I don't have one lined up because I have to stop. I just have to take care of myself right now. So if I'm going to take this pause, let's just do the exercise of if I could do anything, if I could make a pivot and do something else, what would I do? And let's spend some time looking into that. And so it was actually when I was talking to my therapist about this and telling her, I'm like, I don't know if I want to go back to HR. This has left such a horrible, defeated taste in my mouth. Like I can't even think about HR topics right now. Like I just dread it. But what else could I do that would allow me to help people, that would give me the flexibility to show up and be the mom that I want to be and have time for myself and the exercise and the self-care and all of that. And she's like, Katie, have you ever considered being a life coach? Because you've been through some very, very heavy things in your life. Not just this, but other things in my childhood, other traumas that I've overcome. And she's like, you are so insightful and you have been through so much. I feel like you can use those experiences to help other people. So, you should look into it. And at first I kind of laughed at her. I was like, a life coach, are you kidding me right now? Like, and also I'm not an entrepreneur. I'm in HR. I like security. I like structure. Like going out and doing something that is a huge risk. No way. No way. And so, this was around November time. And so I really took the holidays and it was hard, but to not plan, not figure out what was next, but really focus on just balancing and just finding, my core self again without work. And until I felt like I could take on and look at the future without shuddering and wanting to hide, in a very dark closet somewhere. And so yeah, so it was the end of December, and I was like, okay, well, I don't know what life coaching is. I should at least look into it. I'll do a little research, see what this is all about. And I was very lucky that I came across a life coach certification program that allowed you to take about half the course for free. So I was like, okay, no risk here. Like, I'll watch the videos, see what it's about. And what I discovered is life coaching and coaching in general is very much what I had been doing in HR for years. It was my favorite part of HR, and it's really helping employees and helping leaders get past the barriers that they put in front of themselves and helping them find plans to accomplish whatever their goal is, whether it's in leadership and work or if it's in their home life. It's really helping them take a step back and see the amazing possibilities and see the potential that is within themselves. And so as soon as I realized that, I was just like, oh my God, this is who I was meant to be. Like, this is what I was meant to do. And of course, in the business portions, they're like, okay, so now you've got the coaching, like you need to niche down, like what problem do you want to solve? And I was thinking and reflecting on it, and I was like, moms and work-life balance, because my whole life, my whole career, and becoming a mom, like all I've ever said is balance, everything in balance. And that doesn't mean, 50-50 by any means, but for me, it really means being able to show up as a mom, being able to show up as work, being able to show up for myself without feeling guilt that I'm not showing up in the other parts of my life in that moment. And it's been amazing. It's been the best decision of my life. And like I said, I feel truly like myself, and my ability to make a difference, like a really real difference in other people's lives. I can do that and do it in the way that I feel like aligns with my values in this. So yeah.
As you were talking, I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to circle back to that. The very first thing that I had already made a note about beforehand was I was dying to know if you had always wanted to be an entrepreneur. And you answered that there at the end, but can you dive a little deeper on like going from, like you said, wanting that structure and the stability of being an employee, a director, like a C level employee, to being a business owner and what that was like for you?
It was terrifying, and it was a lot of difficult conversations with my husband because he's so supportive, but he is even more about stability and concrete than I am. Like I very much operate off of instinct and intuition, and because it has led me to really wonderful places. And so when I get that pull for something, I want to jump in immediately. I'm like, no, this is what I'm supposed to do. It's going to find a way to work itself out. Like I have to do this. And so having those conversations with him, be like, hey, I want to do this thing that, I don't know when I'm going to make money in this. Like I don't know what this is going to turn into. And there's going to be a very real amount of time where, I'd already spent 2 months not bringing in any money as I was working on my mental health. I'm like, I want to continue that and chase this dream. And then he didn't know what life coaching was either. So it's this whole, educating him on what it is that I want to do and making a plan together to, do that in a financially safe way because we've got 2 kids, we've got the house, like, we want to take this risk without, upending the apple cart, if you will. So it was a lot of hard conversations, a lot of emotional conversations because and again, and we've come so far since January, quite December, January, because at that point I was still recovering from that mental health. I was still moving through that depression, starting to get over it, just barely starting to feel like myself again, but really struggling with my own self-doubt and confidence. And so I didn't present things great, but we worked through it because that's what he and I do. I don't know if anybody has seen Couples Retreat and at the end how they give the donkeys to the main character. Like that really is my husband and I because we get so stubborn, but we're so stubborn for each other that no matter how much we end up on totally different pages, we always come back until we get on the same page and we find a way forward. And so it was this horrible, painful struggle that we pushed through until we got on the same page. And now as he's watching me blossom and he's learning more about what I'm doing and the course that I've been creating, he's like, oh, I can see it. He's like, Katie, that you're onto something. Like this is amazing. And he's going through his own kind of career change right now. And so in the last couple of weeks, and I swore I would never do this, but I've actually gotten to coach him. And so he's gotten to experience my coaching. And so, we had a session, just a few days ago, and like he had that aha moment, and he turns and he looks at me, he goes, "You're scary. Oh my God. Like you're so good at this." And so that was really like rewarding to hear from him because he for sure would be the hardest client I would ever have, just because of that relationship and that kind of not power struggle per se, but husband and wives, we'd always like to take each other's advice.
So I do want to, because I think there's a lot of women out there who might still be, and this is hard for me because I have been an entrepreneur. I say since I was 16. I have just been making my own money since then, and I've never held a job longer than 3 months. So that is hard for me. That's why I'm always so curious when I hear people that came from like a 9 to 5 background and went the entrepreneur route because it is scary. I mean, you really like, I tell my husband all the time, like, you are in charge of how much money you make. And in this economy, like, it's even scarier because everything is so dang expensive. I would like to explore though, or if you have any advice
Mhm.
maybe for any women listening out there that feel stuck in their jobs or, are curious about starting their own business. You had mentioned having a plan, but is there anything else besides having a plan and just really doing your homework and research that you would recommend for somebody in that position?
Yeah, and I think I want to start with the feeling stuck in your career because the advice I got from my therapist that really kicked all of this off, when we were talking about what should I do next, what she told me to do was to write down, what do I want? Like, no matter what job it is, like, what are the characteristics do I want? What pay do I want? How do I want to be treated? What kind of work environment do I want? How do I fe want to feel when I'm doing that work? And then she said, take it a step further and write down why. And basically, what that is, it's a values exercise. And that's why, and I say this all the time, like every great self-help book, course, TED Talk, anything about taking your life to that next level, every single one of those starts with knowing your values and knowing why something is your value. And once you start looking through those lens and making decisions and asking yourself, okay, does this decision align with my highest values? Things get a little bit simpler and it gets easier to figure out what direction you should go or what direction not to go. And is this career not serving you right now? Or, should you try something else? And, based on your values, is it something you should dive straight into, or is it something you should take little baby steps into because your values depend on having more stability? And I think there are so many ways to get there, but the first step for everybody is just really getting clear on your why and your values. And then from there, that's when you can start making that plan. Because if you try to make the plan without that step, that's when you get really lost. And I do think that's where my husband and I were struggling because we hadn't done that in a more formal sense and gotten on the same page about why this plan met the needs of both of our values, and it might be different values but still meeting those needs. And so that would be my advice, is really start with knowing your why, and what gives you motivation and makes you feel comfortable making a decision, whether it's scary.
So I totally agree with that. And that was something for me, obviously, like in marketing, basically the very foundation of your business is your why. And it wasn't until probably a couple years ago I read the book Find Your Why by Simon Sinek. It is amazing. So for anybody out there listening, I just quickly pulled that up. But if you haven't read that, I highly recommend it. Whether you are a seasoned entrepreneur or not, it is amazing, and it will help you do just that. And then let's see. So you talk a lot about aha moments. What was the moment for you? And maybe this was the example with your husband, but or I guess maybe before that, what was the aha moment for you when you realized that you could make a difference in women's lives and touch people in a way that you weren't able to in your director role?
I think the aha moment was a combination of understanding what coaching is, which is not providing the answers. I think that was a big aha moment because so often people like to give advice. They like to tell you what to do, and it comes from a good place, right? But nobody can know what the right thing is for you to do other than yourself. And what I was seeing in coaching and why I was like, oh my God, yes, this is the way to help people is coaching helps their clients find their own answers and find the answers that will work in their life, that they will be more naturally inclined and motivated to accomplish. And that's why it works. And that's why, there are so many great self-help books, but a lot of times they don't work because it's focused on the author's story and what worked for the author, and what works for one person is very rarely going to work for someone else. And so those aha moments is being able to ask the right question or suggest a lens to look at something that really shifts the mindset. And shifting mindsets and bringing up, different ways of looking at things, it's just something I've naturally done my entire life. And I have always, I mean, honestly, since I was a teenager, I've always been that person that, friends or family or people have found me and brought their problems to me. And that's why I say, like, I'm always the silver lining girl, because I've always got a different perspective. I'm like, well, what if you think about it this way? And I've helped people have those aha moments. So when I saw that I could formalize it and make it into a business and do something I was already naturally doing, that was when it all came together. And I was like, aha.
And I think too, there's always, and it's so funny because I have had three businesses over the course of a 10-year entrepreneur career, and everyone's a little bit different. And those little light bulb moments that you have in different parts of your life are just like you look back on them now and it's like, oh my gosh, like who knew that that is where, that moment was going to lead to. So okay, we are going to backtrack to the part of your story where you talked, and it was kind of like going on a loop in my head. Is you kept saying, like, people feel the need to check in on leave, and like as women, we feel the need to have our hands in all the things when we really should be taking care of ourselves, pregnant or not, but especially pregnant. And that's something like for me, as I consider having kids, it's like I want that to be my whole job. Like I want my business to be able to run itself so that I can be a mom as a job. And I think that and correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like we've lost that a little bit where people think it's like being a mom is just something you can do on the side on top of keeping your household, keeping a full time job, keeping all of your social appointments going. Like, it's so unrealistic to me. So I would love your thoughts and opinions on where you think that stems from us thinking that we have to do it all on top of literally creating another human. So any thoughts on that? It's an area that I think about all the time. So I would love your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that. And one, and I was talking to my sister-in-law about this and like checking with her if it was, is this just the feeling that I have, or is this kind of consistent with specifically moms? And I think even when you're not a mom, this perspective like still kind of bleeds over to you. But I was thinking about it like as a mom, we feel like we always have to be sacrificing for our children. And I was trying to think about like why do we feel that? And I mean, of course, we're told like to be a parent means to sacrifice. And I definitely have this theory that because childbirth is so painful and traumatic, like that definitely plays a role in this need to sacrifice for our children. And like if we go to bed in the evenings and we don't feel like we have poured every ounce of ourself into our children, like we ask ourselves, like, do I really love them? Did I give them enough love today? And that's just wild. And I think it's from the childbirth trauma. I think it's from the way our parents and their parents had to raise them because there was no attention on balance. There was no attention on self-care. It just wasn't in the culture. And another aha moment I had, thanks to my amazing little 4-year-old daughter, I think she was like 2.5, and I was sick with a cold, and we were having chicken noodle soup, and there she was, like trying to take my bowl and spoon feed me my soup because I was sick. And I had this moment where I was like, oh my God, I pour all of this love and this attention into my children, and my goal of that is so that they have their own self-worth and they feel loved and they love themselves, and they're going to go into this world being confident, self-sufficient. But I was like, I'm not teaching her that. I'm teaching her how to love other people because children mimic us. They do what we do. And so when I'm giving her all this wonderful love, which is a great lesson too, she's learning how to love other people, but she's not learning how to love herself. And when I realized that, I was like, oh, I have to start modeling loving myself and having balance and having boundaries if I want her to have that. And again, thinking about my own childhood and what I learned, from my mom, I watched her sacrifice. I watched her never sit down. And I struggled to sit down and relax because that is what I saw. And that was the image of motherhood that I had. And so for me, and I think for most moms, it's so hard to do anything for ourselves. Like it just doesn't feel, it feels a little selfish. It's not. It's absolutely not. But it's easier to find motivation in our children, especially for me. And so I was like, no, I have to change this behavior. I have to take care of myself, and I need my daughter to see me taking care of myself because I want her to take care of herself. I want her to have balance in her life. I don't want her to have to go, like, if she wants to go into corporate work, great. But I don't want her to feel like that's the only path, and that if she does that, she's got to run around until she's completely ragged and exhausted. Like, I want her to see how it can be done with boundaries, with balance, and still feel successful and complete. And I have to model that behavior for her. I think that answers your question a little bit, like where it comes from and kind of my mind shift that I had to have.
That was like a mic drop moment, I think. That was like the clip I'm for sure going to use for this episode. But what a way to think about it is that, and again, it's like you said, I think it's something that's taught. We're taught to love other people, we're taught to be nice and be grateful and be kind to other people. Where was the lesson on being that for yourself? Because I know I didn't get that one. And it's generational too. Like you said, I feel like we're coming into an age and I mean, I think we're very far into the era where talking about this stuff and realizing like, oh, hey, like this, we didn't get this growing up. So maybe we should probably give this to our kids. So yeah, that was perfect. Super, super great answer there.
Thank you. Oh, and there was another part of that question that I wanted to address. Oh, the doing it all and why we feel like we have to do it all. And so I think I have a little bit of a different take on that because yes, I think there's a lot of pressure from society, social media, and it's funny because it's a little polarized now. So you have like the perfect Pinterest moms who are doing it all and look fabulous while they're doing it. And then you have the grunge moms that are super relatable and funny and but when you take a step back and you ask yourself, okay, do I want to be either of these moms? Like in reality, like, do we want to be the perfect Pinterest mom? Do we want to be the grunge mom? And the answer is what, yes, yes or no, whatever the individual wants. So I've been seeing on social media this question of, well, is it even right that we're doing all of this? And I think the answer is if you want to. If you're the type of person who wants to be able to do it all, then yes, do it all. Like, and that's the kind of person I am. Like, I've been an overachiever my entire life, and also my maiden name is Best. So I'm sure there's some kind of psychological pressure there, but I get a lot of enjoyment out of being able to say, yes, I have done it all, and not necessarily by myself, but I have done it all with help. I have done it all with outsourcing. I have decided what it is that doing it all means to me, and I did that. And I think that's what women in general, especially if they're feeling pressure or guilt about they are or aren't doing something, they need to stop. And again, this gets back to that values discussion we were having and go, okay, what are my values? And based on those lenses, what do I want? What is going to mean the most to me? Because all these external messages, they're entertainment. That's what they are, and that's how we have to look at them. They're just entertainment. They're different perspectives. They're ways to, come together or get ideas, but it's not about who we are as women. It's not about who we are as mothers. The only person who can and should define that is ourselves.
That was another really great takeaway as well. So, one thing that I heard you say in the beginning was that you wanted to change the world. That's why you wanted to go into HR. It's why, you're so driven to achieve the things you want to achieve. I am dying to know, like, if you could, like, flip a switch and see yourself, 10 years from now, and if everything goes according to plan and you didn't have any obstacles, like what would you hope to achieve? Like, is it publishing a book? Do you have like a number of women that you want to be able to help? Like, what does that going big goal look like for you?
Oh, that's such a good question. And I should quantify that. But right now, like I keep thinking about, and I'm trying to remember who the quote is by, I think it's Mother Teresa, that she says something like, if you want to change the world, go home and take care of your kids. And for me, my thought is every time I help one woman, one mom, who then teaches these skills to her children, I have changed the world. For one person, I have changed the world. And so I feel like the number of women I want to help is unlimited. Like my husband and I daydream about where this business is going to go, and I'm like, I'm never going to want to retire from this. Like when I was working in corporate, like my goal was, okay, work hard enough, make enough money so I can retire early and start living. And I think that's why I feel like I'm going big now because with this business, my goal is no longer to retire because I am living now. I am living the life that I want to live, being the person that I want to be right now. And so retirement is, I mean, obviously we want to put money away and go travel and do things, but I could see myself doing this forever. And I have so many goals. So like at the end of this month, I am launching, and I don't know when this is going to air. So the end, the end of April, beginning of May, I am launching a DIY coaching course for moms to start this process on their own and do it in a way that is convenient for them because I'm a mom and I know how busy it is and I know, I'm still the last person that I want to help. So what I've done with this course is break it down to 2-minute micro coaching sessions a day that they can do whenever they have the time, because I don't care how busy you are, you have 2 minutes. Like, you can't even make a legitimate excuse that you don't have 2 minutes to work on yourself. So I'm trying to, I've made it as so convenient where they can fit those 2 minutes in. And if they've got more time, I've got a lot more material and bonus stuff for them to do. But at a minimum, they've got that 2-minute question and thought to ask themselves. And I can't wait to see how that starts the transformation for people, and opens their eyes, and gets them making change and finding balance and contentment in their life. And so as I've been working on this, I've realized I'm like, I have this outline for this course. It's like, oh, this could be a book. So speaking of publishing a book, I do think in the next couple of years, I will probably publish a book. And again, hopefully I'll write it in a way that it's not like your standard self-help book where you're like, oh, well, it's great that that worked for you, but it doesn't work for me. But something that people can take and apply to their unique life, their unique life situation, so they can get transformation.
I don't know. I'm one of those people. I'm in the same boat where, you know, I don't think that we should limit our dreams. And I think that when you set out to change the world, I think that you can change, like you said, changing one person, you can change their world. Um, so I applaud you, and I can't wait to follow your journey. So, alrighty. Well, that is all my like official questions. Do you have anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
I know it's a thought that has just been rolling around in my head so I guess two thoughts that I would love to share with your audience. One, we all hear that you can't pour from an empty cup. But I know so many people, so many moms who are doing that on an every single day. And what I'd like them to consider though is, you may be pouring from an empty cup, but you're pouring, the bitter tea leaves or coffee grounds into the people you love. Is that what you want to be pouring into them? So, let's, take that metaphor a little bit farther and apply it to the reality of the amazing mountains moms move every day, and imagine how much more and what better love and value you could give to your children, to your family, to your coworkers, if you're, a leader in an organization, your direct reports, if you actually took care of yourself, and that you could, brew this robust tea or coffee and pour that into them instead of, the leftovers. And then the other thing that I have been thinking about work-life balance, of the people are changing the language around that. They're like, work-life harmony, work-life integration, no matter what you call it, balance, true balance is very similar to meditation. And the goal of meditation is not to have a perfectly calm mind all the time. The purpose of meditation is to practice coming back to that calm mind and that sense of calmness and balance. And work-life balance is the same thing. Life is always going to get imbalanced. There's always going to be unexpected struggles. Things are going to go sideways. But the real key to balance is practicing, so when things do go sideways, you can quickly come back to that balance because you have the tools, you have the strategies, and you've done it so much that it's second nature for you. So that's a couple of thoughts that I'd like to leave with your listeners.
I love the work life balance connection to meditation because I think that's something that's really underrated. And I think that everybody needs to do it. And it's something that I've been exploring myself. And people are like, oh, meditation. It's like, okay, I'm going to sit there and try to turn my brain off for 5 minutes. When in actuality, that is not what it is at all. So I think realizing and kind of busting through like some of those myths on what that can look like. But I love that. I think the same idea can be applied to your life. Your life is never going to be perfect. It's never going to be butterflies and roses, but you have to learn how to deal with that. And taking a moment and realizing the things for what they are is what meditation teaches us. So I love that, and I've never heard that before. So that's also, I'm gonna have to figure out how much of this the whole thing is gonna be clipped up, clips everywhere.
No worries.
All right, well, this was an amazing conversation. I think we went down a couple different paths we didn't plan on, but that is the beauty of this. If women want to connect with you after hearing this episode, where can they do that?
Okay, so they can do it in two places. One, especially if they're interested in my course that's going live, they can check it out at katiescoachingcorner.com. So you can always find me on there, connect with me, sign up for my newsletter. If you sign up for my newsletter before the course goes live, there'll be a little coupon. And then the other place, if you just kind of want to hang out with me on social media, you can find me on Instagram at Balanced Mama Confessions. So yes, follow me on there. I like to drop little 2-minute tips for work-life balance, my own little confessions about things that go on in my life and how I find ways to rebalance it or look through something that would normally, be something that might give me guilt and be like, no, through my values and I made this decision, like this is why this is not a guilt-driven confession anymore. So yeah, so definitely check me out at those two places. And yeah, I can't wait to hear from you all.
Perfect. And those links will be in the show notes too. Again, this was an amazing conversation, Katie. Thank you for your time today. And I look forward to following your journey going big.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys, we will talk to you next time. And thanks for tuning in.